What you're about to listen to is a special episode of the 3% podcast in which we recorded the night of readings for the finalists for the Best Translated Book Award for 2020. So there are 15 readings from the 15 finalists, 5 for poetry, 10 for fiction. Some of them have been recorded in advance, some were live. You can watch this entire episode on YouTube if you go to the 2-month review channel on there, because that's the only channel that we upload videos from, and that is linked to in the show notes if you don't know what that is. I also want to, at the jumps, thank Amazon Literary Partnerships for donating $10,000 that'll be split among the prize winners, the authors and translators for both fiction and poetry, and for the judges who have tirelessly read hundreds of books and evaluated tons and tons of books written about them for the 3% website, where you can find write-ups for all of the books under the Why This Book Should Win category. And I encourage you to follow the links and to purchase all of the finalists for this award. Also, if you happen to be listening to this on Thursday or Friday morning, the winners of the Best Translated Book Awards will be announced at a live event at 6 p.m. on Friday, May 29th. If you want to watch that, you have to either email me at chad.post@rochester.edu or sign up through the link that you can find in the show notes. It's a Google form where you fill out your name and your email so that you can get the password to be able to join the event live, to prevent people from, troll zooming us. Anyways, on to the program.
Please let this matter. No one can see matter. Please let this matter. No one can see this or know that I need it. Nowhere to turn.
Welcome to the 13th Best Translated Book Awards, and the first that's live streaming, which is, odd, but as Chad was saying before we started, it's really great. It's really, really wonderful that we can have all of these people here who normally wouldn't be here, normally we do it at Book Expo, and if you couldn't get to New York for Book Expo, you couldn't participate in this. So this year we get to, and I'm really grateful for everyone who's coming, and also for being able to have a reading, which is something we haven't done in the past. So 13th award, first reading. Chad will be dropping links to Bookshop in the chat, and they're also online. So you can go to bookshop.org. There'll be all the finalists are available to purchase there. We have a lot to do, so I'm not going to waste too much time. I just want to give a shout out to the judges. Am I muted, Chad? No. A shout out to all the judges, which is for the fiction jury. It's Eliza Woke Almino, Pierce Alquist, Haley Desert, Louisa Ermelino, Hal Helvinka, Keaton Patterson, Christopher Phipps, Leslie Range, and Justin Walls. On the poetry side, we have Nancy Naomi Carlson, Patricia Lockwood, Aditi Machado, Laura Maris, and Brandon Shimoda. So those are all of our jury members, and they did a wonderful job all year long.
I just unmuted everyone so you can applaud them. Thank you guys for being our judges this year.
The media that people are using direct transaction as an excuse for not.
Let's get to the first reading, which is going to be from Karen Emmerich, who will be reading from Good Will Come From the Sea by Christos Ikomono, and it's from Archipelago Books.
Hi, I'm Karen Emmerich, and I'm going to be reading from my translation of Christos Ikonomou's Good Will Come From the Sea. And the book involves internal economic migrants in Greece coming to an island where they are not very welcome. And I chose a very brief passage that I've been thinking about a lot. Really, since I read this book, it's resonated with me, and it feels It's very much about making a new life, and so it feels also pertinent to the current moment, even if we're in the same place we were before. We have to rethink it and redo it all over again. Now that you mention it, I said, all of life is a fairy tale, a story you tell yourself. That's what life is. A fairy tale you create in your head. A story about the place where you live and the places you used to live. The things you experience every day. The people around you, men, women, children, relatives, friends, neighbors, colleagues, enemies, strangers. The things that happen and those that should happen and those you wish would happen. And then something happens and the story ends and you have to make another story if you want to keep on living. You have to create another story in this new place where they sent you to live, in a new place with new people. If you want to survive, you struggle to make that story. You struggle to fit new places and people into this new fairy tale you're creating. You have to fight that fight, to struggle for that story, to build a new world with caves and streams, plane trees, chapels nestled on hills, stony cliffs and sandy vineyards, rowboats, anchors, oars. And in order to create that new world, you first have to create a new self. New eyes, new ears, a new tongue, nose, hands. Because that's the only way for you to learn new images, new sounds, new smells and tastes. You have to learn the sea and the weather and how the winds blow in winter and summer. You have to learn not to be scared when the sirocco uproots trees and sends stones tumbling. Not to be scared by the smell of wild arum, or when you hear shearwaters crying in the dark, or the wooden stairs creaking on August nights. You have to learn how to unhook a bluefish without it cutting your fingers, and how to kill a moray eel by pouring vinegar on its head. And then when you finally manage to build your new world, you'll be gripped by the fear that something will happen in this world too will end. And you'll have to go in search of another and another and another. But for how long? How many worlds can fit into one world? How many lives into one life? How many lives does one person need in order to keep living? And then I saw Lena leaning over me, shaking me by the shoulders. You're babbling, do you hear me? You're babbling again. Pull yourself together, you're making fools of us. Fuck it, don't you even care for the kid's sake? I mean, you could give a shit about me, but the kid? Thanks so much.
That was really lovely. Thank you, Karen. That is an excellent reading to start with. And the next up is Celia Hawksworth, who will read from EEG by Dasner Durdic, translated from the Croatian, and New Directions published that one for us.
Myself. Am I on? Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Oops. Sorry, I've got a message in the middle of me. Right. So we thought I'd read the very end of EEG, which is the last novel that Dasha wrote, and it'd be the last pages of that novel. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of things to say about it. That the narrator of the book is, I don't think there's much point in beating about the bush, but he is an alter ego of Dasha's, called Andreas Bann. But he is a man, and that's relevant for a certain point in this passage. The other thing is that Dasha's work is full of references and quotations to writers that she likes and admires, and some indeed that she doesn't particularly, but anyway, lots of quotations. So there are a few here, but just be prepared that suddenly you'll find a character who isn't fictional appearing beside her. I want to have my eyelids lifted in order to see better. I'm only half looking. But if such an undertaking entails a general anesthetic, I'll have to wait. That carcinoma of the breast operation was a walk in the park compared to when my appendix burst and its rotten contents spilled through my insides. I should have died, but there, I didn't. In hospital, on drips and intravenous injections of antibiotics, I lasted 10 days. It was summer, and the mercury soared to 40 degrees Celsius. We didn't get clean sheets because they said the woman who worked in the laundry had gone on holiday. Only one shower in the department functioned, the one in the women's bathroom. Maybe they thought men didn't wash. After that operation, I puffed up. I was like a clown. I almost took off. Then everything settled down, came back to normal. I deflated to a decent static state. Sometimes I even hear my heart beating. I swapped places with Ada. Sorry, I should have said Ada's his sister. You miss the city, I said. You go there. You'll have my books and my memories of a previous life. Ada said, I don't need memories. But she went, just like that. That city holds nothing for us. No recollections, no old images, no joys, and no sorrows. We can read its history, we can sometimes study it. We can hear about it and watch the inhabitants of that city falling into a trance over their own memories. In that city, we wear ready-made clothes, new, ironed, that never fit the way they should. They rub like newly bought shoes or starched shirts. I buried myself in Ada's Rovin cellar. I painted the walls, made a new bathroom, changed the windows, threw out the old furniture. I'm gradually settling in. I go for walks. The woods are full of pines. I collect pine nuts. I pick mushrooms and asparagus. I have old friends. I play preference. I play chess. A few days ago, I caught myself singing. Occasionally, Leo and Joya come. Ada comes as well. We sit in the garden and laugh. We're together, the remnants of the Ban clan. Then I cook for all of them. That makes me happy. I grill little gilt-head fish. I fry squid. We eat manestre and chard. I make pesto from my pine nuts. I get Teran wine from Tonio from Motovun, Malaysia from France from Porec. Ricardo brings me grappa. When I moved, I sat on the shore and gazed into the distance. I didn't weep like that phony, that mellifluous Coelho who talks drivel. I opened my backpack, which I'd been hauling about with me for 2.5 decades, and which had reached the end of its road. In the bottom rolled a few old mislaid trivialities, incidentals, trifles, trinkets that rang like little bells, fading away. The sea glittered. Little silver arrows like acupuncture needles flew through the air and pierced my arms, my chest, my legs, my eyes. And for an instant, I saw nothing, no blueness, no infinity. I heard again Choran whispering. To an extent, I acknowledged my country, which had given me such a significant opportunity for suffering. I loved it because it couldn't respond to my expectations, which was additionally soothing. Then Dom Sebastian, King of Portugal, crept up and sat down beside me, put his arm around my shoulder and said, others take my madness away with all that took place in it. Without madness, what is man more than a healthy beast, corpse adjourned, that procreates? Then I leapt up and swam. I'm an excellent swimmer, strong and graceful. That day, the soft, seductive and tranquil sea poured over my back until it had wrapped around me, embraced me, whispering, now you're mine, imprisoned and secure in my depths. I am your master. But with each of my movements, Dom Sebastian became ever quieter. I speeded up the work of my legs and arms. I breathed steadily. I cut through the water, wounded it, and the sea softened. I swam for hours. That was my last marathon of account settling. I swam, and alongside me, like a support crew, slid Kierkegaard, multiplied 100-fold, repeating with me like a mantra, with each stroke, rhythmically, to that water. My misery is my castle, which is set like an eagle's nest among the clouds on top of the mountain. no one can conquer it. From it, I fly down into reality and snatch my prey. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. I'm going to repeat myself with adjectives throughout the night, but that was really lovely. I wish I had more time with people reading to me in my life. The next reading is going to be our first from a poetry finalist, and that is going to be Shimon Adaf reading from Aviva No, and that was translated from the Hebrew by Yael Segalovitz, and Ellis James Books published that.
I read from my collection of Aviva No, translated from the Hebrew by Yael Segalovitz. I'm going to read the first translation and then afterwards the Hebrew origin, so you might hear the sound. 5. And I did not know that I would have to live your death, and how easily it would fit into words. Just as mother explained to the grandchildren, we will never see Aviva again, and I heard her cry, not that howling lamentation, just the flow of one whose strength vanished in the flame. And they asked, caught up in wondering, if you climbed up to a star, what would you do if it fell? Would you be hungry? And she put them in the bomb shelter and came sobbing to the living room where I sat and said, how simple it is to see in the dark, like an ember glowing wild. Losing a child means always losing a child. היי, ולא ידעתי שאצטרך לחיות את מותך וכמה פשוט יהיה לנסח את זה, כמו שאמא הסבירה לנכדים. לא נראה את אביבה עוד אף פעם. ושמעתי אותה בוכה, לא הקינה הזאת המנהמת, רק השטף של מי שכוחותיו אפסו בלהבה. והם שאלו דפוסי תמיהה, אם טיפסת לכוכב, מה תעשי מפה אם תהיה רעבה? והניחה אותם במסתור הקסם, ובאה יפוכה אל הסלון שם ישבתי, וכבר אמרתי, כמה פשוט לראות את זה, בחשיכה כמו גחלת. לאבד ילד פירושו תמיד לאבד ילד. 6. She had a heart heavier than the ocean, my mother, and it sank. Do you feel the desert in your bones? The sunken ships, struck like crosses in the sun, the wells empty of stars, the poles of the manna hailing down. Do you recall? Love. היה לה לב כבד מן האוקיינוס לימי והוא שקע. אתם חשים בעצמות את המדבר? את הספינות תבואות, תקועות בחול כמו צלבים, את הבורות ריקים מכוכבים, את אופק ברדמן, אתם זוכרים? "26. 43 years old, you are the woman you will always be. The forehead still unwrinkled, your eyes well cradled in their orbits. From the iris looms a meteoric spark, rubbing against the void, slicing up the space, breaking through a crystalline crust of atmosphere. Amino acids rush to fuse, hasten to secure their strength. Heavy mammals step out of the sea, send the famished stir at the titans of all times. Trees quivering with the thrill, a blazing ball rolling above them, radiating from its spin the level ire, music, a lash of mercy, ideologies pounding as their wheels of thought go round, a breathless race whose purpose is just you in the fatherly heat of broiling Av. Heavy hate shatters in the air like splendor, like bones, like fashion. 3 and 40 years, the light web's bliss cuts your body. You look with wonder at your fate, more memory than flesh. כבב. בת 43, אתה אישה שתהיי כל שאר חייך. המצח עוד חלק, עינייך שקועות נכון וערובות. מתוך הקשתיות מבט שביב מטאור, ההוא המנגש בוקה, חותך את החלל, מבקיע קרום גבי של אטמוספירה. חומצות אמינו נחפזות להתרכב, עצות אל הבטחת כוחן. יונקים כבדים פוסעים החוצה מן הים, נותנים מבט מורעב, בענקי הזמן, עצים מצומררים מן הרגשה, כדור בוער סחרחר מעליהם, וכבר קרונות מסיבובו, חמת הרצח, מוסיקה, צליפה של חסד, אידיאולוגיות מואחות בגלגלי מחשבתן, מרוץ נמהר שתכליתו הוא את, בלבב מרותח. שרב שובר את האוויר כמו נס, כמו עצמות, כמו אופנה. 43 שנה, עדנת רשתות האור חורצת על גופך. מסתכלת ברגלייך בתמיהה. אחות בשר מזיכרון. Thanks.
Thank you for that. We are going to have at least one other bilingual reading, and in a world where we had more time, it would be really great to have more bilingual readings. And you should check out all of the Why This Book Should Win posts, which are up at 3%. But that one was particularly good at capturing the heartbreak of that set of poetry. Our next book is going to be read by Frank Wynne, and it's from Animalia by Jean-Baptiste Delamo. That's translated from the French and published by Grove.
It's one that also didn't make it into the right folder.
Uh-oh.
2 seconds. Here we go. Found it.
Fine, I'm happy if you're fucking up and not me.
It was just in the wrong space. Here we go.
From Animalia by Jean-Baptiste Delamo, published by Grove. Father Antoine drags himself as far as the sacristy door, which he unlocks and disappears behind. He rummages for a moment, then reappears, tangled in his surplice with a purple stole, the parish cross tucked under one arm, the sacramental oils wrapped in fabric, and a glass bell in one hand. Let's go, he says, pushing them towards the door. And so the procession sets off. Eleanor leads the way, lighting the road as best she can, holding before her the oil lamp whose light fractures and fades in the ruts. With the other hand, she shakes the little bell, muffled by the rain. The dog, Alphonse, trots along ahead of them, skirting the puddles. Raymond Carrère carries the parish cross, the base tucked into the crook of his left elbow, the body leaning against his shoulder and resting against his cheek. The rain plasters the mourning veil that surmounts the cross against the wood and the gaunt, dripping face of Christ, so that the radiant visage lifted up towards the night becomes the corpse in a winding shroud. As they cross the square, the villagers gather at their windows in a halo of candlelight and make the sign of the cross. The women they encounter lift their muddy skirts and, being unable to kneel, bend their legs and bow their heads. As they pass by the smithy where the furnace is blazing, the blacksmith stops beating the anvil and quickly blesses himself. In the embers, a horseshoe glimmers lazily beneath the lava. From the shelter of barns and storehouses, dogs bark and tug at their leashes as Alphonse passes. From doorsteps, children watch the black, silent procession as it moves away from the village beneath a ragged sky that stings their cheeks with driving rain. Soon, the barking of the dogs dies away, Puy-la-Roque disappears behind them, and there remains only the deep electric twilight, the grey-green recesses of the hollows of hills whose curves they can barely make out. Convulsive thunderbolts, silent and simmering, light up the higher strata, illuminated domes. Hen pheasants scuffle through the brambles, small grain, blue, furtive, sandless, scurry around the edges of fields. A gust of wind lifts the black veil of the mourning face of Christ and with a crack whips it away, and the procession pauses for a moment, helpless and shivering. They watch as the funeral veil flies off into the chilly night, scampers along the lane, caught up in the eddies of dead leaves, rises into the air and then disappears as lithe and capricious as a bat. They resume their laborious march. Father Antoine staggers along the side of the road in the tufts of springy grass, trying his best to lift the soutane trampled by his muddy clogs. He is shouting words at them, which reach them only in snatches. The purple stole flaps at his face, and he pushes it down, then stops, half bent, his hands resting on his thighs. They are coming to a roadside cross at the foot of which they agree to stop for a moment, and the priest sits down breathlessly, muttering, "Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord." He rummages in the bag containing the sacramental oils, takes out a flask of eau de vie and brings it to his lips while Eleanor and the verger wait, she still tinkling the bell, he struggling against the wind, blustering around the parish cross, whose weight is digging into his shoulder, taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, trying to keep his balance. The night is coal black now, pierced only by the turbulent flame of the lamp being held by the frozen little girl. A sudden flash of lightning reveals them, fixing them like dazed fallow deer before returning them to the darkness, leaving on the disc of the sightless pupils a negative after-image of the roadside cross and their outlined silhouettes. Father Antoine carefully packs away his flask, and they help him up, each tugging on one arm with all their might. Then they set off once more. A fresh gust of wind sweeps along the road, lifting the parish cross, which escapes the slippery hands of Raymond Carrère. The verger tries to regain his footing, racing behind the cross as it lifts itself upright for a moment, as though raised into the night by some higher power. Then it bends, dragging him through the ditch, where he falls sprawling in a fallow field. Father Antoine and Eleanor watch, dumbfounded, as Raymond Carrère, his mouth filled with dirt, painfully tries to get up, slips, falls again, struggles, and finally manages to get to his feet, spits, and wipes his muddy face with the back of his hand. The verger looks at the priest, the child looks at the priest looks from one to the other and says nothing. Then the verger pulls the parish cross from the mud, heaves it onto his shoulder, and steps across the ditch. By the time they arrive at the farm, the rain has washed his face and that of Christ, and the verger, panting for breath, sets the cross down against the front wall. Marcel opens the door to them. They go inside, and all three stand motionless on the threshold. The genitrix is sitting next to the father. She lifts her gaunt, trembling face towards them. The body lies in the bed. The father has died before receiving extreme unction. His limbs, contorted by a final spasm, raise the sheet. His head is thrown backwards, such that they cannot see the eyes, trained forever on the bedhead. But the gaping mouth, the anemic palate, the loose teeth, the scrawny neck, the skin stretched taut by the Adam's apple, as if the father had swallowed something much too big, too angular. Eleanor rushes to embrace the still warm body and kiss the beard, a handsome grey with occasional white tufts.
Thank you for that, Frank. Very energetic reading. I think there's something fun about hearing a translation in the translator's accent. I think it just, I don't know, brings something else different to it. So our next fiction translation is going to be from Stalingrad, which was translated by Robert Chandler and Elizabeth Chandler, and Stalingrad's by Vasily Grossman, published by the New York Review of Books. And we're going to be hearing Robert Chandler read the translation.
2 seconds, this is a complicated one. Okay, hold on.
Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in late June 1941. Vasily Grossman's novel Stalingrad was largely about the 18 months between then and December 42, the height of the Battle of Stalingrad. Grossman worked as a war reporter, and a great deal of the novel is based on his own notebooks, his own recollections. But he writes equally vividly about moments he didn't himself witness. This account of the first day of the war is not something that Grossman himself saw. Nevertheless, it's extraordinarily vivid. One of Grossman's most remarkable qualities, very much noticeable here, is his ability to move between their microscopic and their vast scale. In the darkness, Novikov went up to the window and glanced abstractedly, with sleepy indifference, at the sky and the quiet nighttime garden. He would remember more than once just how casually he had looked for the last time at the world of peace. He woke up with a precise awareness that something terrible had happened, but with no idea what this might be. He saw tiny crumbs of alabaster on the parquet floor and glimmers of orange on the crystal pendants of the chandelier. He saw black scraps of smoke against a dirty red sky. He heard a woman wail. He heard the cries of crows and jackdaws. He heard a crash that shook the walls, and at the same time, a faint whining sound in the sky. And though this whining was quiet and even melodic, it was this that made Novikov shudder in horror as he jumped out of bed. And I should mention that Novikov is at this moment at the headquarters of a fighter regiment right on the frontier between the Soviet Union and Germany. And this headquarters is located in what was once a Polish manor house. Novikov saw and heard all this in a fraction of a second. Just as he was, in his underwear, he ran towards the door. Unexpectedly, he found himself saying, "Steady now," and he walked back to his bed to get dressed. He forced himself to do up all the buttons on his tunic. He adjusted his belt, straightened his holster, and walked downstairs at a measured pace. Later, in newspapers and journals, he often came across the phrase "surprise attack." How, he wondered, could anyone who had not experienced the war's first minutes ever understand what these words really meant? Everyone was asking questions. No one was replying. Has the petrol tanks caught fire? Was it a bomb? A military exercise? Saboteurs? Some of the pilots were already standing on the steps outside. One, with no belt around his tunic, pointed towards the city and said, "Comrades, look, there." Flames, the colour of dark blood, were climbing up over the railway stations and embankments, swelling and ballooning into the sky. At ground level, there were the flashes of repeated explosions. Black planes were circling like gnats in the bright, deathly air. "It's a provocation," someone shouted. And another quiet, yet clearly audible voice pronounced with awful certainty, "Comrades, Germany has attacked the Soviet Union. Everyone to the airstrip." Soon after this came a moment that lodged itself in Novikov's memory with a particular sharpness and precision. As he hurried after the pilots dashing towards the airstrip, he stopped in the middle of the garden where only a few hours before he had gone for a stroll. There was a silence, during which it seemed that everything was unchanged. The earth, the grass, the benches, the wicker table under the trees, a card chessboard, dominoes still lying scattered about. In that silence, with a wall of foliage shielding him from the flames and smoke, Novikov felt a lacerating sense of historical change that was almost more than he could bear. It was a sense of hurtling movement, similar, perhaps, to what someone might experience if they could glimpse if they could sense on their skin and with every cell of their being the earth's terrible hurtling through the infinity of the universe. This change was irrevocable, and although only a millimeter lay between Novikov's present life and the shore of his previous life, there was no force that could cancel out this gap. The gap was growing, widening. Already it could be measured in meters, in kilometers. A life and time that Novikov still sensed as his own were already being transformed into the past, into history, into something about which people would soon be saying, yes, that's how people thought and lived before the war. And a nebulous future was swiftly becoming his present. At that instant, he remembered Zhenya, and it seemed to him that his thoughts about her would accompany him throughout this new life. Taking a shortcut to the airstrip, he climbed over a fence and began to run down a gap between two rows of young firs.
I have no idea how so many translators are such good readers, but I'm pretty grateful for it tonight. And I think the line that struck me there was that lacerating sense of historical change, which, not that every book has to be relevant to our life now, but that one kind of feels it. So we're going to go to poetry again, and this time it's going to be Sarah Riggs reading from her translation of Time by Etel Adnan. And that's translated from the French, and Etel Adnan is from Lebanon. And the Nightboat Books put that out for us.
Hi, everybody. So this book is composed of 6 sequences that have never appeared together as a book before, although all were written originally in French. And this one is called At 2 p.m. in the Afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Good. The sun came out at night to go for a stroll, and the divine crossed the room. The windows opened. Writing comes from a dialogue with time. It's made of a mirror in which thought is stripped and no longer knows itself. In Palermo, men are as strictly trained as horses, or else they have the shining violence of flowers. It's more bearable to think of death than of love. Greek thought explored all things the way it explored the islands. When men no longer have power over women, over whom will they have it? All Sicily is painted by the planting of vines. The shards of grief that a teapot transforms into inexpressible joy. The barberry figs ripen on brilliant mornings with firm flesh, with certain steps. Limits everywhere, how to reconcile soul and body, what to do between 2 white sheets. She said, standing in the middle of her ranch, how black it is, eternity. On the other side of the street that separates him, from the garden's splendor, Isa sits with a black coffee and talks about the mother whose brain invents aberration. Me, I am sent back to the swamps in the darkness of my doubts. The curtain falls on a mass grave. The Babylonian gods now give birth only to cadavers. Philosophy is a non-knowledge. Thought takes pleasure in measuring its borders. The body is a sacred place because it bursts with life and lasts briefly. Time reminds me of those cemeteries. in which mountains are devoured, enveloped in their mist. The cock crows, the dog barks, the cat climbs a tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really nice to have you. I'm excited about the recordings and the live ones. I am loving every minute of this so far, and I hope the rest of you are too. Next up is Carolina Orloff, reading from Die My Love by Ariana Harwitz, and that's translated from the Spanish, and Ariana's from Argentina, and Charco Press gave us this.
Translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff. I'll be reading chapter 1. I lay back in the grass among fallen trees, and the sun on my palm felt like a knife I could use to bleed myself dry with one swift cut to the jugular. Behind me, against the backdrop of a house somewhere between dilapidated and homely, I could hear the voices of my son and my husband. Both of them naked, both of them splashing around in the blue paddling pool, the water 35 degrees. It was the Sunday before a bank holiday. I was a few steps away, hidden in the underbrush, spying on them. How could a weak, perverse woman like me, someone who dreams of a knife in her hand, be the mother and wife of those two individuals? What was I going to do? I burrowed deeper into the ground, hiding my body. I wasn't going to kill them. I dropped the knife and went to hang out the washing like nothing had happened. I carefully pegged the socks to the line my babies and my man's, their underwear and shirts. I looked at myself and saw an ignorant country bumpkin hanging out the laundry and drying her hands in her skirt before returning to the kitchen. They had no idea. Hanging out the clothes had been a success. I lay back down among the tree trunks. They're already chopping wood for the cold season. People here prepare for winter like animals. Nothing distinguishes us from them. Take me, an educated woman, a university graduate. I am more of an animal than those half-dead foxes, their faces stained red, sticks propping their mouths wide open. My neighbor Frank, a few miles away, the oldest of 7 siblings, fired a shotgun into his own arse last Christmas. What a nice surprise it must have been for his pack of kids. But the guy was just following tradition. Suicide by shotgun from his great-great-grandfather, great-grandfather, grandfather, and father. At the very least, you could say it was his turn. And me? A normal woman from a normal family, but an eccentric, a deviant, the mother of one child and with another, though who knows at this point, on its way. I slowly slide a hand into my knickers and think I'm the person in charge of my son's education. My husband calls me over for a beer under the pergola, asks, blonde or dark? The baby appears to have shut himself, and I've got to go and buy his cake. I bet the other mothers would bake one themselves. 6 months apparently is not the same as 5 or 7. Whenever I look at him, I think of my husband behind me about to ejaculate on my back, but instead turning me over suddenly and coming inside me. If this hadn't happened, if I'd closed my legs, if I'd grabbed his dick, I wouldn't have to go to the bakery for cream cake or chocolate cake and candles half a year already. The moment other women give birth, they usually say, I can't imagine my life without him now. It's as though he's always been here. Poof. I'm coming, baby. I want to scream, but I sink deeper into the cracked earth. I want to snarl, to howl, but instead I let the mosquitoes bite me, let them savor my sweetened skin. The sun deflects the silvery reflection of the knife back to me, and I'm blinded. The sky is red, violet, trembling. I hear them looking for me, the filthy baby and the naked husband. Mama, dada, poo-poo. My baby's the one who does the talking all night long. Coco, nana, baba. There they are. I leave the knife in the scorched pasture, hoping that when I find it next, it'll look like a scalpel, a feather, a pin. I get up, or unbothered by the tingling between my legs. Blonde or dark? Whatever you're having, my love. We're one of those couples who mechanize the word love, who use it even when they despise each other. I never want to see you again, my love. I'm coming, I say, and I'm a fraud of a countrywoman with a red polka dot skirt and split ends. I'll have a blonde beard, I say, in my foreign accent. I'm a woman who's let herself go, as a mouse full of cavities and no longer reads. Read, you idiot, I tell myself. Read one full sentence from start to finish. Here we are, all three of us together for a family portrait. We toast the happiness of our baby and drink the beers. My son in his high chair chewing on a leaf. I put a finger in his mouth and he shrieks, biting me with his gums. My husband wants to plant a tree for the baby's long life and I don't know what to say. I just smile like a fool. Does he have any idea? So many healthy and beautiful women in the area and he ended up falling for me. A nutcase, a foreigner, someone beyond repair. Mangy out, isn't it? Seems it'll last a while, he says. I take long sweeps from the bottle, breathing through my nose and wishing, quite simply, that I were dead.
That is a hell of a start to a book, and I remain objective about all of these books, but in terms of title alone, Die My Love, I absolutely love that title. So thank you, Carolina, for reading from it. Next is going to be Lexi Bloom, an editor from Pantheon, who's going to be reading from Stephen Snyder's translation of The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa.
Hi, I'm Lexi Bloom. I'm Yoko Ogawa's editor at Pantheon. I'll be reading to you from The Memory Police. The pile of books was taller than I was. Some had not yet caught fire, but it was impossible to read the titles. I squinted at the spine, so it would have made no difference had I been able to recognize them. Still, by watching them until the moment they disappeared, I hoped to preserve in my memory something from their pages. There were books of all sorts, some in slipcases, some bound in leather, weighty tomes and slender novellas, piled together awaiting their turn in the flames. From time to time, the mountain would collapse with a muffled whoosh. The flames would shoot up and the heat would grow more intense. After one of these moments, a young woman suddenly moved out of the circle of onlookers, climbed up on a bench and began to shout something. Startled, the old man and I exchanged a nervous glance. Others in the crowd turned to look at her. She was screaming so frantically that it was impossible to understand what she was saying. Arms flailing, saliva flying, she was clearly agitated, but it was hard to tell whether she was angry or just distraught. She was dressed in a shabby overcoat and checked pants, and her long hair was tied up in a braid. On top of her head, perched at a jaunty angle, she wore an odd thing made of soft material. As she rocked violently to and fro, I found myself fearing it would come tumbling off. "Do you think she's mad?" I whispered to the old man. "I wonder," he answered, crossing his arms. "She seems to want them to put out the fire. But why? To stop the novels from disappearing, I suppose. Do you mean she's unable to rid herself of her memories? Poor thing." Her cries gradually rose to something close to a scream, but of course no one made a move to extinguish the enormous mountain of flames. The people nearby just watched her with pitying looks. "They'll take her if she goes on like that," I said, starting toward the bench. "She's got to get away. We've got to do something." "I'm afraid it's too late," said the old man, catching hold of me before I could move. 3 members of the memory police had appeared from the woods and were already pulling on her arms. She tried to resist, clinging to the bench, but it was hopeless. The thing on her head fell into the mud. "No one can erase the stories." The last words she said as they dragged her away were the only ones I was able to understand clearly.
Thank you to Lexi for stepping in for Stephen. And our next is going to be another poetry book. And I'm going to indulge for a minute to say that we have 3 Vermonters in a row right now. Stephen Schneider is a Vermonter and the reader of Materia Prima, who's an editor of the book and a translator for it. Kristen Dykstra teaches at the college that I went to up here. This is Materia Prima by Amanda Berenguer, translated from the Spanish by a whole collection of people, bear with me, Jillian Brazil, Anna Dini Morales, Monica Della Torre, Urayan Noel, Janine Marie Pitas, Kristen Dykstra, Kent Johnson, and Alex Verdolini, the authors from Uruguay, and Ugly Duckling Press put this out.
So my task is a little bit different. Rather than doing a sort of immersive experience of one passage, I feel as co-editor a certain responsibility to try to get as many of our translators out in front of you tonight as I can. So I thought what I would do is read a series of our shortest poems, which means a couple of our fabulous translators, I can't get to them because their poems are long, and they really are immersive and are wonderful experience that way. But this book is also a cabinet of curiosities. It ranges across Amanda Berenguer's very long and deep career. She was immensely curious about all manner of things, so it goes into many different directions. There's really no one poem that would do it justice. So what I'd like to do with our team of 8 translators, I'll start with an excerpt from a book called The Identity of Certain Fruits, and I believe the translator, Ana Dini Morales, is out there somewhere on one of those screens right now. Amanda Berenguer was interested in visual art, and this entire book reads like a series of very intense still life paintings of fruit. This is called The Grapefruit. Identification. Grapefruit is a glowing cloak of thick yellow chrome, watered down with milk that forms or folds, 9 sizable slices of minuscule translucent drops, a cup of liquid summer, a flare of alcohol acidulated, a pinch of honey or benevolence, 3 grams of aloe somberly accused. Temperament. Seemingly good-natured, endures bitter dreams, more philosophic than sensual, sustained by an indifference to sour or sweet. References. Noticed, ever-centered and luminous, looking like a lamp, like a book, golden, full with illustrations, where an allegory's nest hidden. Now, another fascination of Amanda Berenguer was geometry and non-orientable objects, of which there are several in this book. One is a Mobius strip, but that one is too long to go into. There is an entire book, however, dedicated to meditations on the Klein bottle, a strange formation. And I believe that Jillian and Alex may also be out there. They translated the boa. The boa. When Dylan Thomas stuck his pinky finger into the neck of an unoffending bottle and couldn't remove it, he carried his finger and the dangling bottle everywhere, largely unconcerned. He didn't know that he himself had been trapped by that very portentous form. His finger was the first to be sucked into the mouth of the bottle, then his hand and his arm, and then, slow, laborious, his whole body entered, true boa constrictor, the bottle. Only writing his hallucinatory semen shone over the course of that digestion across the glassy, scaly stomach of the bottle. Towards the end of her life, Amanda Berenguer remained very active. She had one book that came out posthumously. And this is a book that my co-editor went through before me and pulled a number of things out. And he created some really beautiful renditions of her poems that are influenced by Emily Dickinson. Amanda Berenguer actually translated some Emily Dickinson. And I think this very, very short piece called Implosion gives you a little bit of a sense, not only of how she handled the use of the dash and the pause that Emily Dickinson managed so well, but also how Kent handled sound. Implosion. Implosion, stew of mud and bitter froth, fate conjugates the lower case of human folly. Slow slide towards oblivion. The clock goes wild, spins tick-tock under muffling veils, tolls to no avail. No one clamors or wails. We're stuck in gears of nerve and vein. The great shadow floods and drags toward the no subject, regal, hushed. Preposterous sequence enshrouding the skeletal core or cell or trap to cage furtive destiny or the glowing bowels or the repeating sky until all doors go canceled. Lastly, I'm going to take a risk since Zoom is a visual format. I am going to share our visual poems, at least a couple of them. These are translated by Urayo Manuel, also, I believe, present tonight. I'm pausing for just a moment on the title because I know that some of you may have a little bit of a delay in having the slides load. But for those of you who can see it, these are experiments that Amanda Berenguer conducted in the 1970s when she also did experiments with audio. I won't read every word because that's not really the experience here. Sorry, it won't advance. I am going to just pull up my, there we go. Okay. This is the one I was looking for. This is a landscape. So once again, it ties into Amanda Berenguer's interest in visual art. But you can see it's a very unusual thing to be called a landscape. It is a chart with one axis is light and one axis is time. It features sea, horizon, mountain, clouds, birds, hours. But the thing I'll briefly point out for those of you who do translation is that there's also a number of letters that Urayo Manuel was thinking of capturing. So in the Spanish, you have La Fiel de Rota Solar over here, and he had to choose words that would capture that shape. So he has the true solar defeat as the organizing principle of this chart. This piece is called Arena. It is in Amanda Berenguer's handwriting, which we had to interpret in a number of these pieces. It was rather difficult. We came up with differing transcriptions, but you can see how well the overall shape of this piece actually translates words aside. So we have a relatively simple set of words: wind, dune, and the sand that advances towards you in this image. It becomes a sequence. Outlines, and with every piece, like the sand and the wind and the dunes, the poems shift. And I would also like to throw in, thank you, Ugly Duckling, for doing color, which we didn't know who was going to do. So I'll just run those through. You can see the different outlines and end with a couple of photos of Amanda Berenguer herself. Alfredo Alzugurat at the National Library of Uruguay worked with me to get not only this picture of Amanda when she was younger, but also we wanted a mature photograph because Materia Prima is really a document of a mature writer across many decades of her career. Thank you to the judges for noticing Amanda Berenguer. We really tremendously appreciate it. I'm done. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you for doing such a good job representing all of, or as many of the translators of this book as you can.
I think I got 4.
That's pretty good. And I'll just take a moment to, I've always appreciated, even before I was involved, how the Best Translated Book Award judges don't shy away from anything, and that includes nominating a book that has a whole number of translators. I think that's just a really wonderful thing that they're all brave enough to do when they're doing their very difficult reading at time. The next reading is going to be one of our judges from the fiction jury. She's going to, Eliza Woke Almino, will be reading from Yuko Tsushima's Territory of Light, which was translated by Geraldine Harcourt. Both the author and the translator have passed away. The translator fairly recently, last year, I believe. This was her last published translation, and she is one of the masters of Japanese translation. And Farrar Strauss and Giroux put this out.
Hi. Well, it's a very hard act to follow. That was wonderful. And as Patrick mentioned, I'm one of the judges this year, the fiction judges. And it's such a pleasure to be able to read today. I'm also a translator, so I do recognize a few names and faces here today, which is exciting. And it's wonderful to be able to hear from the translators as well. So I'm going to be reading from Territory of Light, which was actually first published in the 1970s as a series of stories and installments. But today we're reading it in English in one piece as a novel. And it's a heartbreaking, beautiful story about single motherhood. So I'll be reading the first couple of pages of a chapter early on in the book, in which the narrator, who is unnamed, wakes up to her crying toddler in the middle of the night. And it's a scene that kind of recurs throughout the book. The magic words. My daughter cries and cries. In my sleep, I curl up, my back to the sound. Muffled by her crying, brief dreams succeed one another, dim as magic lantern slides. Fluorescent red rambling roses are flowering away along a hedge. Feeling quite blissful, I am about to pick a rose. It starts to rain, and I can't leave the station. My daughter lies on a green table. I am in tears. You're her mother. Why were you late to pick her up? This would never have happened if you'd been on time. I knew I should have kept her, her father sobs, shaking her body. The crying fell into place. Conscious of my daughter's cries at last, I opened my eyes. They were wet. I checked the clock. It was 2:30. These nightly crying spells of hers tended to start at the same times, around 2 and again at dawn. They had been going on for nearly a month now. I couldn't have said exactly when they began. By the time I realized it, she was having them regularly, and wetting the bed as well. As my sleep was interrupted night after night, the sight of her crying would rile me till I felt more like slapping her cheek than taking her in my arms. And although I managed to control my hand, I would snap at her unthinkingly. How can I sleep with that noise? Do you have any idea what time it is? That's enough. Come on. Can't you tell me what's wrong? How am I supposed to know if all you do is cry? Well, tough then. She cries harder at this. Even more riled, I shove her aside. Okay, so you've wet the bed again. What's up? You never used to. Come on, stop that now. It doesn't do any good. Will you be quiet? She sobs miserably. My pajamas are icky. The futon's all wet. I pile on the blame. Don't be silly. You're the one who wet them. We're all out of pajamas. And this is the only futon. Stay like that. And go to sleep now. Crying won't help. Did you hear what I said? Quiet down. What does it take for you to understand? A slap? She won't stop. Giving in, I stand her up, take off her pajamas, cover the wet patch on the futon with a towel, then moisten a washcloth in the kitchen and apply it to cool her chest. Little by little, her rapid heartbeat calms. She clings to me, sniffling, and eventually falls asleep with her mouth open. As if finally coming to my senses at the sight of her sleeping face, I hurriedly begin to caress her head and her cheeks. I drop off too before I know it, but when her crying wakes me again at daybreak, I'll only do it all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza, for that really nice reading, and thank you for stepping in, and adding to your duties as judge. I really appreciate it. Again, you should go to 3% and read all of the Why These Books Should Win posts, but that one by Carrie Tullinis, who may or may not be here, that was another one that really struck me and really made me want to get into one of the books. So definitely check that one out. Our next reading is going to be translator Aaron Robertson, reading from Beyond Babylon by Igbia Segbo, translated from Italian, and Two Lines Press, who's one of the many recurring people, publishers. Behind me, I've put up past nominees representing no press twice. So that's just what I have in my house, and kind of giving you a sense of how many publishers have been represented over the 13 years. And now we can turn to Aaron.
Hey. Hi, everyone. It's good to hear from you all. So thanks to everyone for reading. It's really kind of encouraging to just know that we are still active and still reading and still engaged. I think Igiaba is watching from Rome, so hi Igiaba, and thanks for staying up late. So I will be reading a part from a chapter narrated by a character named Elias. He is from Somalia, but he left as soon as the military dictatorship came in power. So in this part, he is speaking to his daughter. He's talking to her about both his own life and the life of his parents, Mahid and Fahmy. And I'm sorry if there's some noise. I'm currently outside because inside my dogs are too loud. So hope that's all right. It had been a long time since the rain fell that hard. My old soccer field was covered in green. My old field. I scored so many goals there. Your sister's mother was a goalkeeper when she was younger. She also played on a field like this. She was from Buenos Aires, beautiful, exceedingly so, but she didn't know it. I loved her very much. We kept one another company during a terrible period. I do hope your sister is like her, at least somewhat, with her grit, if nothing else. And you, Zura, are you like Miriam? She didn't love soccer. She liked to go to the movies. She went crazy for them. She was only a girl when I married her. She spoke to me for hours of cowboys and long braided Indians, the Indians that she loved and who were called Alibistan in Somalia. I never understood why. Now my old soccer field is full of little kids with AK-47s, their cheeks packed with that hallucinogen they all chew, that damned quat. It was different when I played there. We were carefree. Now the children have empty stares. Occasionally, though, when there is a brief respite from the war, rarely, someone brings an old deflated ball. I watch them make a few passes. Sometimes they're pretty good. The world turned its back on these kids, but behind the world's back, they still play, unaware of having already grown up. Who knows if they dream of making a goal like Maradona's at the Mexican World Cup in '86 and holding a trophy in the air. 11 touches of the ball, 11 magical touches, starting from midfield and going straight to the goal. The older kids are trying it. 11 touches aren't much. Their adversaries fall like bowling pins. The cup is close, poverty far away. They dream behind the world's back. Even I, old now and worn, maybe I dream too. The fields are green and we wait for a carnival that will not come. Perhaps it will come and take us away with its festiveness. It gets dark early in the neighborhood. The elderly sing an old ditty and I prepare to revisit our past again. Excuse me. Elias was born in Mogadishu, or Zamar, as Somalis like to call it. Zamar is an Arabic name deriving from Akmar, meaning red. The name was serendipitous. His mother, Fahmy, didn't even have a chance to give it to him. She never saw him. She died before hearing his first wail. She was brain dead, body intact, but the brain dead. The name, his aunt said, was given to him by his father. On the day he was born, they recalled. No one recalls, though, what the hell the weather was like. Aunt Nadifa maintains that there was a powerful wind. Aunt Zara spoke of a battering rain, while Aunt Miriam recalls an intolerable heat. Only Aunt Binti shrugs and says, I don't have time to recall such a silly thing. Mahid wasn't present at the birth. Everyone said he changed with marriage. They noticed the strange crease around his mouth and the eyes that permanently looked elsewhere. Marriage changes the spirit. Look at how serious Mahid has become. No, he's no longer a boy now. All the remarks sounded the same. The words used most often were responsible, wise, conscientious, and adult. In everyone's eyes, Mahid was no longer a boy. Goodbye to the crying, the thrills, the fistfights, the laughs. People knew Mahid did not laugh anymore. His lips were hardly ever upturned, and rarely did he show teeth. The few times he did, it was Fahmy who made him do it. She never lost her will to live. When the Italian and German troops left them suffering and humiliated in the sand, she took his hands between her own and let them rest on her bloody garments. He couldn't look her in the eye. Cousin, I am not a man anymore. You'll be my man if that's what you want, if you want me. She taught him to love her again one day at a time without asking for anything in return, merely a smile every once in a while. Fami felt sharp pains in her lower abdomen. At night, she saw those white men's eyes. The last one was so small, the little rapist vomited milk on her. Sometimes she would wake in a sweat. Then she would look at Mahid, and every night he'd recall that she was the strong one. He didn't know about her nightmares, and he couldn't have consoled her anyway. He felt injured in his humanity and dignity. Maybe he could have run a hand through her hair as one does with a child, but no, Mahid couldn't even do that. After 2 years of chaste marriage, Fami said to him one night, "We have to." He understood, and they made love as if it were the world's cruelest torture. Rain decided to visit Mogadishu, and owls beset the night with tireless verses. He couldn't imagine how to approach that generous woman's body. He got on top of her because it seemed natural to him. He struggled. He held onto her breasts and hurt her. She didn't get wet, and he didn't have an erection. They stopped. She caressed his forehead. "We'll try again tomorrow." Every night he grabbed onto her breast, and every night he hurt her. No wetness, no erection. Fami was exhausted. They had to have a child, but they didn't have the strength. They had to, so as not to give rise to rumors. People noted the unsteady progress of their marriage. They had to make a child. They had to do it together. "One day we'll get better," Fami said to herself. One day. It seemed so far away, though. Thanks.
Aaron, thank you for that. And I, for one, would not object to dog content. I'm a little surprised my guy hasn't wandered into the shot yet. But again, thank you for reading. And the next one is going to be, I've lost my place. No, I haven't. It's another bilingual reading from Lindsay Turner and Stéphane Bouquet. That'll be from Next Loves, and that's translated from the French, and Nightboat gave that to us.
Okay. It's really such a pleasure. Can you hear me, everybody? Okay. It's really such a pleasure to be here in such an amazing company of writers and translators, and I'm so excited to be here with Stéphane as well, who I think has joined us by video. Stéphane, I don't see you. I think he's here. And we're very grateful that he has, it's like 1 a.m. in Paris, so I'm glad that he could stay up and read to us a little bit. So we're just going to read together in English, in French, then in English, a couple of sonnets from the Next Loves. The sonnets are from a sequence that begins the book. The sequence is called Les Amours, which is obviously the title of the sonnet sequence by the famous 16th century French poet Pierre de Ronsard. But as you will see, these are very contemporary sonnets. So Stéphane, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I don't know if you hear me or if you see me or yeah. Okay. Dans le métro, je lève la tête du livre et oh, il tient des fleurs pas pour moi et une boîte à gâteaux pas pour moi. Une fois de plus où un visage est un dangereux débarquement d'espérance. Par exemple, nous ne sommes pas déserts de demain. La preuve, tu es là, débutant à la lisière des actes humains et t'as peur de revenir sans sourire, ça va aller. Sinon, je pourrais, à ta place, t'entourer d'affection, inventer des canapés de lumière, les installer bien soigneux dans le fond d'accueil de mes chambres intérieures où je prie, allongé, contre la tendresse du Dasein ou toute autre impression de tiédeur. Lindsay?
In the metro, I look up from reading and oh, he's holding flowers, they're not for me. And a pastry box, it's not for me. One more time when a face is a dangerous, hopeful landing, i.e., tomorrow hasn't yet deserted us. The proof is you're there, beginner at the edge of human acts and your fear of coming back unsmiled at. It'll be okay. If not, I could instead overwhelm you with affection, invent sofas made of light, put them meticulously at the back of the entrance to interior apartments where I'm waiting, stretched against the tenderness of Dasein or any other feeling of warmth.
T-shirt rouge et voix voilée, on fait du yoga ensemble, beaucoup moins fort que moi, mais supérieurement plus beau. À la fin, dans Shavasana, quand on est censé devenir des vibrations quelconques de l'air et la cloche rituelle nous dépose presque derrière l'absence, je peux seulement penser avec mon animal de vivre, oh là, là, il y a cette longue main sans vie allongée à 2 mètres, si je me roulais sur lui, est-ce vraiment désormais la seule espérance d'atténuer, à cause de la douceur dans tes os, la vitesse de mourir, contre quoi je récite follement un autre rose ce matin mignon.
Red t-shirt and husky voice. We do yoga together. Much less strong than I am, but so much more beautiful. At the end in Savasana, when we're supposed to become one of those vibrations in the air and the ritual bell sets us almost behind absence, I can only think like an animal to live, oh, 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 that long, slim desire stretched out 2 meters away. If I rolled over on him, really, would that from now on be the only hope of slowing because of the sweetness in your bones? The quickness of death against which I recite, a rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the things I love most about bilingual readings, especially with poetry, is it really just makes you pay attention how pretty like both languages can sound and both poems can sound. So thank you both for doing that. In a pre-COVID time, I live near Montreal and I like Quebec Lit a lot. So there's a lot of bilingual readings there, and that's something I've always been a fan of. And my final little comment here is I assume everyone else is looking over people's shoulders at their bookshelves and has noticed Duck's Newburyport. I know we're on translation here tonight, but Duck's Newburyport is an amazing book. And if you haven't read it, after you read all of these finalists, then you should go ahead and read Duck's Newburyport. But we're going to move on. And so the next reading, we're going to return to the fiction world. And that's going to be Antonia Lloyd-Jones reading from her translation of Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, a contender for best title on the list. And that's by Olga Tokarczyk, translated from the Polish, and Riverhead published it.
From London. My name's Antonia Lloyd-Jones. I'm going to read you an extract from Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And in this extract, the narrator has gone to see her neighbour, who she calls Oddball. And they live in a remote village. I don't know what Oddball does through the dark months, because we're not in very close contact, though I won't hide it. I would have hoped for more. We see each other once every few days, and when we do, we exchange a few words in greeting. We didn't move here for the purpose of inviting each other to tea. Oddball bought his house a year after I bought mine, and it looks as if he'd decided to start a new life, like anyone whose ideas and means of the old one have run out. Apparently, he worked at a circus, but I don't know if he was an accountant there or an acrobat. I prefer to think that he was an acrobat. Whenever he limps, I imagine that long ago, in the beautiful 1970s, during a special act, something happened that caused his hand to miss the bar, and he fell from a height onto the sawdust-sprinkled floor. But on further reflection, I must admit that accountancy isn't such a bad profession, and the fondness for order that's typical of the accountant inspires my approval and total respect. Oddball's fondness for order is plain to see in his small front yard. The firewood for the winter lies piled in ingenious cords, arranged in a spiral. The result is a neat stack of golden proportions. Those cords of his could be regarded as a local work of art. I find it hard to resist their beautiful spiral order. Whenever I pass that way, I always stop a while to admire the constructive cooperation of hands and mind, which in such a trivial thing as firewood expresses the most perfect motion in the universe. The path in front of Oddball's house is so very neatly gravelled that it looks like a special kind of gravel, a collection of identical pebbles hand-picked in a rocky underground factory run by hobgoblins. Every fold of the clean curtains hanging in the windows is exactly the same width. He must have a special device for that. And the flowers in his garden are neat and tidy, standing straight and slender, as if they'd been to the gym. Now, as Oddball bustled about in his kitchen, I could see how tidily the glasses were lined up in his dresser, and what a spotless cloth lay over the sewing machine. So he even had a sewing machine. Shamefully, I pressed my hands between my knees. It was a long time since I'd devoted any special care. Oh well, I have the courage to admit that my fingernails were quite simply dirty. As he fetched the teaspoon for a brief moment, his drawer was revealed to me, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. It was wide and shallow, like a tray. Inside, carefully arranged in separate compartments, lay all sorts of cutlery and other utensils needed in the kitchen. Each one had its place, though most of them were quite unfamiliar to me. Oddball's bony fingers purposefully chose 2 teaspoons that soon came to rest on willow green napkins right beside our teacups. A little too late, unfortunately, for I had already drunk my tea. It was hard to have a conversation with Oddball. He was a man of very few words, and as it was impossible to talk, one had to keep silent. It's hard work talking to some people, most often males. I have a theory about it. With age, many men come down with testosterone autism, the symptoms of which are a gradual decline in social intelligence and capacity for interpersonal communication. Well, as a reduced ability to formulate thoughts. The person beset by this ailment becomes taciturn and appears to be lost in contemplation. He develops an interest in various tools and machinery, and he's drawn to the Second World War and the biographies of famous people, mainly politicians and villains. His capacity to read novels almost entirely vanishes. Testosterone autism disturbs the character's psychological understanding. I think Oddball was suffering from this ailment. But that day, at dawn, it was hard to demand eloquence of anyone. We were utterly dispirited. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Antonia, for another energetic and entertaining reading. I laughed a bunch at that one. And Antonia wanted to be here, but it's very late there, and she's feeling under the weather, so here's to hoping she feels better. The next reading is going to be Andrea G. Labinger reading from 77 by Guillermo Sakamoto, which is his second nomination in 3 years? 2 years? I forget. And that's from Open Letter. It's translated from the Spanish, and it's another Argentinian book, because Argentinian books always will make the BTBA list.
Hi, I'm Andrea Labinger, and the excerpt I'm going to read to you is from Guillermo Sacomano's novel 77, which was published by Open Letter in 2019. The title 77 refers to 1977, arguably one of the most brutal and oppressive years of the Argentine dictatorships of the 70s. The protagonist who's speaking is named Gomez, and he is a literature professor, a gay man. And in the beginning, he's talking about some encounters with various individuals in his apartment house. The odor of burnt hair stank up the building in those days. As soon as you walked in, you noticed the smell. The lobby, the staircases, the halls, the elevator, you could smell it everywhere. Not everyone could identify that smell, but I could. For me, it was unmistakable. That smell came to me from my childhood. In the place where I was born, a village in Patagonia, scattered among cliffs, there was a neighbor, a friend of my mother's, who was a nurse, as well as a machi. She gave injections, but she also cured the evil eye and indigestion. She assisted at childbirths and drove away spells. When she burned hair, it was because the evil she was fighting was powerful. Whenever I came home at night, I would sniff to see where that odor was coming from, but I couldn't manage to figure it out. I've lived in this building forever, and I know almost all the tenants, except a few renters who move in and out. It was built in the 30s, and some of its first occupants still live here, retired old fossils who spy through the peephole before opening the door to anyone who rings their bell. Every time new tenants arrived, I would hear the old folks say that they needed new blood in the building. The expression affected me. Yes, I'm impressionable, and back then, that winter, I was even more so. Ever since I moved into this apartment, I've had few dealings with my neighbors. My solitude was already populated with too many voices to complicate it with the choral novel of alliances. I've always felt I had little discretion. It was in those days, when the smell of burnt hair started to become noticeable, that a young man with the air of a born winner moved into the apartment next door. I would run into him entering or leaving the building with his slick-backed hair and toothpaste ad smile, his impeccable suit, tie, and executive briefcase. I'm your neighbor, he said one morning when we got into the elevator together. Gonzalo del Solar, he introduced himself. I work in marketing for Gillette. Pleased to meet you. The smell, he said. Where's that smell coming from? Work, I said. Someone's having work done. I'll have to ask Ramon, said Del Solar. Every super is also a secret agent. Don't worry about it, I said. There are lots of old folks here, and more than one of them is nuts. I have to admit that Del Solar had a certain bearing. Besides, he looked me straight in the eye. But if this was a pickup line, I wasn't about to bite. All I needed was to lose the respect the other tenants had for me. That morning, before taking his leave, he said to me, anything you need, I'm at your disposal. He smiled, no matter what time it is. He had left my hand impregnated with his Eau Sauvage cologne. No sooner did I take my hand away from my nose, I could smell the burnt hair again. The odor had become almost palpable. Around that time, Del Solar came to me with the business of the damage. One morning before I left for school, the doorbell rang. It was Del Solar. He was pale. He had lost his smile. He apologized for what he was about to ask me. Because he didn't know how to ask it, he said. He didn't like to get involved in his neighbors' personal lives, he hurried to add. But I seemed like a trustworthy guy. Maybe I would know something about it. Something about what? I pressed him. If I had any idea, Del Solar asked, who in the building was screwing around with voodoo? Then he showed it to me, impaled on the tip of a ballpoint pen. He held a dead, dried-out toad. Witchcraft, he said. I didn't know what to say. I'm not superstitious, he said nervously, but someone in this building has a thing for Rosemary's Baby. I advised him to take the matter seriously. Report it to the super, I told him. Ramon had to know who was burning hair and was involved in witchcraft. That's what I told him. Because I thought that by becoming an informer, Del Solar would alleviate Ramon's suspicions that he was a guerrilla. A guerrilla, I imagined Ramon would think, wouldn't resort to swearing just because someone had stuck a toad on his doorknob. A guerrilla in those days surely had other things to worry about. Thank you.
Thank you for that reading. That was really lovely. I love Guillermo, and I hope Open Letter continues to publish him because I would continue to read him. We're getting towards the end. So just, again, I thank everyone for being here. Thank everyone for reading. Thank all of the judges. This has been a blast. I just scanned through the comments. Everyone seems to be having fun. I'm really happy about this. Live events are their own thing, but this streaming thing, I think some of it's going to stick around, and I'm grateful for that. It is the last reading. No, yeah, it is the last reading. We are on Erin Monroe, who is going to be reading from Camouflage by Lupe Gomez, translated from the Galician, which I love seeing on here. It is really fun to see kind of underrepresented regions on here. And considering I know Erin from living in Montreal, she lives in Montreal, I like the underrepresented places. It works for me. Circumference Books published this one.
Thanks, Patrick and Chad, too, and thanks, everybody. I just want to say, first of all, I really enjoyed the readings tonight. It's been superb. I hope this does continue as a tradition, because I tune in again for sure. And I wanted as well to just give a shout out to all the publishers who so generously publish translations into English, in our literatures in English, which is really great and keeps me alive, I think. And a special thanks to Circumference Books, who published Lupe Gomez's Camouflage in my translation. I know Dan Wiesel, who's the designer of Circumference and is in Singapore, is with us. Hi, Dan. Dan made a beautiful design for this book. I'm going to read from the end of the first section of the book, which is called Secret Energy. And I might mix in a few lines in Galician. You spoke to the doctor without using words. You had no language. History had sliced the beauty of your lips with a knife from inside. Your world was not visible on maps. Your entrails were totally secondary, invisible. Falabas com médico sem usar palavras. Não tinhas idioma. A história cortou com cutelo interior a beleza dos teus beijos. O teu mundo não existia nos mapas. As tuas entranhas eram totalmente secundárias, invisibles. You washed clothes of blue in the river, in winter, in silence. I watched you and discovered the beauty of intimacy. You seemed a fairy without a plow, a woman free, clean, expulsed. There were black flowers in your exile, and your hands were rough with chilblains. You wept as if Madeleine Peyroux herself sang jazz in the streets of Lugo. You gave birth to me. Parichas me. Every night you wept without letting tears fall. You held me in your lap and rinsed my eyes with chamomile. I danced. I was just a year old. Grandma Carmela made cheese on the hearth and gave me a bit. She prayed. Cancer took her. Life is a crystal that bit by bit disappears. I slept in a mysterious cradle of wood. From you, I learned the energy of verses, the spiritual music of trees. When you milked the cows, you wore old clothes. They smelled of bay leaves and cow pies. For me, you bought pretty dresses at the fair. I was revolted by fresh pulled milk. It smelled bad. I didn't like cream. We boiled the milk after going to Mass. You kneaded bread dough with water and local white flour. There was no time for kisses or sweet talk. You kept boats in your pockets. I took off running. Thunder scared us. We prayed to St. Barbara. The pianos we never had. The songs we never sang. Your apron old and stained, the gold teeth of your father Antonio could write, and drank aguardiente in the evenings. We buried him in a wooden casket. The church bells tolled for the dead. He was an intrepid grandfather, an intellectual. He loved to go to Madrid, Bilbao, Ferrol. He always said, I'll say it clear as St. Clair. He loved coffee. He had a brown cap and black umbrella. He went about in pinstripe jacket and white shirt. We walked through the gardens and hills together and waved farewell with our handkerchiefs to planes crossing the sky. To dream of Galician bagpipers who scribble poems of love in shadowy hotels. Wait for me, Grandpa. Please wait for me. Espérame, abo. Espérame, por favor. Fuses short out, breakers trip, electromagnetic sparks spit, microphones crackle, lights gone out. We recite aloud. We are constellations burning in the vermilion lesions of the body. Parichas me, e a luz inundou minha cara. You gave birth to me, and light inundated my face. Thank you.
That was a fantastic reading to end on. Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, everyone. If Chad wants to unmute, we can have applause for everyone who participated in every way they did. Everyone but himself. Thank you, everyone, again for participating to the Amazon Literary Partnership for to the winners, both the authors and the translators, and to give a stipend to the judges for all of the absurd level of hard work and reading and discussions and patience they've all shown this whole year. I'm proud of everyone who has been a part of this. It's been lovely, and thank you all for coming.
I need a life that's right. I need to win. I'm tired of coming home sick. Someone will care about this. Please let somebody care about this.